In this video, I'm going to show how to make sure that a camera can follow a player or a character or any moving object. So there's a couple of ways you can do that. One of them is basically the way that people have been doing it for a while, and it's super simple. I've created this scene here with a few boxes and a ground plane just to show you things moving. And also I have this character here, this girl Kira, which we have set up in another video. She has an animation state machine, and the animation state machine has a humanoid walk cycle. So basically what happens is if I press play, she's going to play this walk cycle endlessly and she's going to walk forward. So she's going to be our moving target. But as you can see, she goes out of the view. So we want to set up the camera so that it follows her. Now, as I said, there's a couple of different ways. One is very simple, and it basically consists only in selecting the camera and parenting it to the game object that's moving. And now, you can set up the camera as you want, and if you press play, then the camera is going to move with the objects, although it's a bit of a stiff movement because, of course, the camera is moving like one-to-one. So that's okay. It might do the trick. There's another way though, which is I think more interesting, and I'm gonna briefly cover that. So the other way is to use Cinemachine, which is a new asset in Unity. It's basically now part of Unity. If you're using any version that's 2018.1 or newer, you can find Cinemachine by going to the window, Package Manager, and then here you find Cinemachine as a package, and you can click install, and it's going to be imported in your project. So after installing, Unity will recompile the scripts, and then you will have the functionality of Cinemachine available in your project. You will see it because here there's the Cinemachine menu, right? So it means the Cinemachine is correctly installed. If you're using Unity 2018, if you're using 17.4 or older, you can still get Cinemachine from the asset store for free just by searching for Cinemachine, and you will find it here. It's basically the same workflow. Once you have Cinemachine installed, what you want to do is you don't want to parent the camera to the character. So I'm going to remove the camera and bring it back here so that it's not parented anymore. So how do I work with Cinemachine? Cinemachine has this concept of virtual cameras, which means you have something like kind of like camera operators. So it's like somebody is holding the camera, and then you tell that somebody who they have to frame and who they have to follow. In this case, we want to tell that camera to follow the girl. So I create a new virtual camera by going to Cinemachine, create virtual camera. And as you can see, as soon as I do it, the camera is moved to the position of the virtual camera. So this virtual camera, this CMVCam1, has taken control of Cinemachine and, has taken control of the camera itself. So what I want to do here is I could potentially like move this VCam and rotate it to make it show that it looks at the girl. But actually Cinemachine makes it way easier. So rather than setting up the camera, by moving it around, if you select the VCam, you will notice here that the VCam has two important parameters, follow and look at. And they basically define together how the camera moves and rotates. Follow defines the movement and look at defines the rotation. If you don't assign them, this camera is only going to be static, this VCam. But if you do assign them, then it's going to use these two modules, the body and the aim, to define movement and rotation. So if I assign the girl now, so I select the prefab and assign it to, for example, follow, now the camera is going to move relatively to the girl. And by playing with this follow offset, I'm able to select the offset from the girl to the camera. But actually, instead of playing with the values here, I can literally just drag the camera into the scene. And then let's say that I also want to assign the prefab as a target to look at. So as soon as I do this, you see now the symbol that was here before is not present anymore because the modules are actually working. I assign the look at, and now I'm tweaking the values in the aim module. If I go to my game view, you can actually see that now the camera is looking at the girl. You will also notice these game window guides. Basically, this is a frame that allows you to define how the camera reacts when the game is in play. You can deselect these guides by going here on the virtual camera and unticking this option, and then you won't see them in the game view. While you tweak your camera, it's actually very useful to have the game view and the scene view side by side. So I'm going to do that now. So I have a better view of what's happening. Now I have, again, my VCAM, and now I can really start playing with the values. So you will have noticed that the VCAM is pointing to the girl's feet. I don't want that. I want to point to her face. So I can do that by playing with the tracked object offset and make sure that I'm tracking the head instead. And actually, if I were to turn the window guides again, you will see that now the target is here. I can move it slightly higher. And again, I can adjust the position of this camera. And you see, because of Cinemachine, the camera is always gonna keep the girl into the center of the frame. So now I can really adjust my point of view. I can turn the guides off again if I don't want them. And the interesting thing is that the camera is gonna use a certain damping to follow the girl. So if I press play, you will see now the camera is following the girl. But if I were to play with these damping values, so put them way higher, for instance, then the camera will start following, but just with a certain delay. So you see that it starts moving a bit slower. And that's interesting to give the impression that the camera has a certain weight. I'm gonna bring it back to 1. Same thing can be done here with the aiming. So for instance, if I were to bring this up, then the camera will rotate slower. Cinemachine has many more options. I don't want to go too much into detail. You can obviously define more virtual cameras and point at the different things. And then by playing with this priority value, you will switch from one to the other. But these are the basics. So again, just to recap, you will create a new virtual camera, and then you would assign to the virtual camera potentially a follow target and a look at target. And when you do that, the camera is gonna follow the character or look at the character. I also want to show you what happens when you assign only one of them. So for instance, let's say that I don't assign any look at, and you see here the warning is telling me that like this module is not doing much. So we're only looking at this now. This means the camera is not gonna look at the target. You can notice that if I move it, it doesn't look at the girl. But if I press play, it still follows the girl. While if I were to do the opposite, so let's say that I have the girl in the look at and not in the follow, now the camera looks at the girl, but when I press play, rather than following, it's just gonna turn. So as I said before, movement, rotation. And I think with these options, you can create very interesting cameras, whether they are for gameplay or for narrative. Don't forget that Cinemachine works really well with the timeline, the new Unity feature timeline. So if you go to sequencing timeline, you can open the timeline panel, and in here you can create little cutscenes, and you can use Cinemachine as your camera choice, and then you can cut between one camera and the other.